Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Enrichery podcast. My name is Melanie. I am the area director here at the Enrichery.
Good afternoon. I am Chuck Bates. I'm a financial advisor with Advocates Wealth Planning here in the Houston area, and I specialize on helping college bound families.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chuck, for being here with us today. The Enrichery has worked with you for a long time.
I was going to say, I think this coming school year will be our fourth year together. So I'm super excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. Do you want to tell our listeners just a little bit about what you do and how you help families getting in or not getting into college, but I
Mhm.
guess with their college finances?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I'm a financial advisor at Advocates Wealth Planning. I help families understand the basics of how financial aid work and the business model schools use to give their aid, right? Some are need based, some are merit based. And it depends on where your student wants to go, how to maximize those opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think the question is that you get the most from parents in these meetings or these situations?
I would say the first one is almost always, does it even worth my time to complete the FAFSA? And my answer is always yes. There's a lot of reasons that families should do that. You never know what's going to happen with your job, your career, your savings, medical situation. The time it takes to complete that and the potential benefit on the back end is well worth it. So
Yeah.
doesn't matter how much or how little you make, it's worth doing.
Yeah, yeah. So you are the financial aid scholarship expert. So I am just gonna we compiled some questions that we get from families. So the Enrichery, we walk the students and the families through the process of, building the school list and figuring out what they want to major in first and second choice. And then kind of walking through the essays and all of the whole process. But then we get the questions about scholarships, financial aid. We can help with the application process, but as far as like the money end of it, we don't always have those answers, which is why we turn to you. So I have some questions from our families.
That's great. It's a great partnership because I can barely spell my own name. So I will not be helping anybody get accepted into college, but I can tell them what it's going to cost.
Great. And I don't know anything about math, and you don't want me doing any of that for you. So great. We make a good team.
Awesome.
So let's go ahead and start with the question that every parent is thinking, but doesn't always say out loud. How much does college actually cost in 2026?
Well, I would say in general, it's going to cost you somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000 a year, depending on the school you go to. Right, in-state Texas schools for most Texas families are going to be somewhere right between, you know, 29,000 and 35,000, depending on if it's Texas Tech, Sam Houston, U of H, and you start looking at the Baylors, the TCUs, and the SMUs, you're getting up close to 100,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that's something that parents and families look at after they have already created the school list. And so that was why we wanted to do this before, because we're headed into that season.
Absolutely. And, those are sticker prices, right? What we call the cost of attendance. So that's going to include your tuition, your room and board, direct billable things, and a few unbillable things. But what those numbers don't include are the discounts or the scholarships or grants that the schools give. And, I had looked up some numbers right before I
Sure.
came, and like Baylor this year, the average discount was 17,000 for most families, or at least a lot of the families I worked with.
Mhm.
TCU, it was almost 24,000.
Wow.
So, if you knock those off the 89, $90,000 price tag, it does come down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Another question we have is that if parents or families look at college's tuition and think there's no way, should they cross it off the list?
I would never encourage anybody to cross a school off the list because of money, but I would encourage you to go in well informed, right? Like I just mentioned for Baylor and TCU, those are relatively significant discounts. And you may or may not know what those are going to be until you get your financial aid award letter. So I would say apply, but be realistic about what your potential aid is going to be. And you can use tools like the College Aid Pro software, or you can go into the common data set and see what the average discount to sticker is for some of these schools. But a lot of it's going to depend on your student, the unique situation that the schools are looking for. You know, that they may need somebody who's been great at debate, and you might get a huge award because you're the only person with a debate background applying this year. There's a lot of random variables that go into it.
Yeah. And it's all stuff that we don't know, right?
Exactly. I mean, they're called institutional priorities, right? And you never know until after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we here at the Unitary, we get this question a lot. families who make too much for financial aid. Is that an actual true thing? Are there families that make too much, or is it a myth?
Well, there are absolutely families who make too much, but it needs to be a pretty high number, right? And it's really dependent on your unique family situation. How many kids do you have? How many kids do you have in college?
Hmm.
How close are you to retirement? All these things matter and determine whether you're going to get need based financial aid. So it really is unique family to family. And I would say you always want to complete those financial aid applications because you don't know what a school's business model is, how generous they're going to be. Maybe they're in a year where they're just not getting the applicant pool they need, and that can trigger them being more generous as well.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of leading into that, we talked a little bit about FAFSA. So let's talk a little bit about it some more. What is, just kind of in the simplest possible terms, what is FAFSA and who needs to fill it out? Everyone.
Sure. Yeah. So agree. Everyone needs to, and most schools are now requiring it to graduate, right? You can either complete it or fill out a waiver. But in simplest terms, what it is it's the application for federal aid and federal loans. So that's going to be Pell Grants and federal direct student loans and Parent Plus loans. Um, and if you're going to borrow or there's a chance that things could change in your financial situation where you might need a little extra money to get you over the top, you definitely want to be completing it and applying each year.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a senior and you have a senior.
Yes, ma'am.
I was actually shocked that because my son is taking a completely different route. He's going into the trades. And so I was shocked when we got the graduation kind of checklist and they were like, no, you have to fill this out. And so of course my son fought me on it. But we had to. But I think that that is something great that they just, it is a graduation requirement at a lot of schools. So everyone has to fill it out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things a family can do. And the risk reward, right? Like you may not want people knowing what your income is, and that's one thing, and I understand that. But I've had a family who was exceptionally well off, and the breadwinner passed away suddenly, and that created some challenges, right?
Yeah.
You have an estate that you have to probate and go through the courts, and if the non-breadwinner spouse wasn't working, that can create some gaps. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
you just never know.
I can only imagine. That's awful. Um, so when does the FAFSA open and when should families file it?
Generally, it opens in October. Over the last few years, there's been some hit and misses with their deadlines. It got pushed all the way back into January one year, but generally October. And I would always encourage you to complete it as early as possible. There's no penalty for waiting, but there's no benefit for waiting either. So the earlier, the better. The way it's set up now, the reality is the FAFSA, you can probably be done in less than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The CSS profile, on the other hand, will take much, much longer and is much more challenging.
Yes, yes. And I think we'll get into the CSS profile in a minute because that's a whole different ball game. What documents does a family need to gather before sitting down to fill out the FAFSA?
The FAFSA and CSS profile for both, they probably need to have W-2s for everybody working, including students if they're working, their tax return from the prior year, so essentially 2 years ago, any investment account statements that are not retirement accounts. So individual retirement accounts, 401ks, you don't necessarily need to have for the FAFSA, but if you have a taxable investment account, you would need to have that. And then the values of any real estate outside of your primary home would be important to have.
Okay, yeah. So parents have mentioned to me a few times as we're, getting students in for college admissions right now, for the 2026-2027 cycle. They've been telling me that FAFSA has changed recently. Can you kind of go over what those changes look like, and what should they expect?
Sure. So the FAFSA Simplification Act was a few years ago, and the goal was to make it easier to complete and give aid to more people who might need it. And then President Trump unwound a few of those things. So one of the things that came in and then back out was businesses, small businesses. Originally, if you had a business with under 100 employees, you didn't have to value the business and it didn't count against your financial aid. Then several years ago, they said all businesses are going to count. And then again, recently, they unwound that and now it's businesses under 100 employees don't count. Some of the other changes, you can now complete it on your cell phone. It's actually mobile ready.
Oh, interesting.
And they pull your data straight from the IRS. So that's no longer a choice. You essentially have to agree to allow them to do that. But they have a good interface and it works pretty well. The only time it's a challenge is if in the tax year they're pulling, you had maybe a divorce and now your tax status is different than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Things like that can have an impact, but for the most part, it's pretty seamless.
Okay. Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about FAFSA and the financial aid end of things, but we're also talking about scholarships.
Mhm.
So when most parents hear that word, what do they picture and what is the reality?
Yeah, so I think this is just my perception. I think parents think of local civic organizations and groups that their kids participate in activities giving scholarships, right? Whether it's the Spring Branch Education Foundation or the local FFA or the local booster club. And those are all great and they really can be meaningful. But the reality of the situation is that about 80 to 85% of all discounts come directly from the schools themselves. Some are guaranteed, some are, competitive, and some schools only give merit based aid, and some schools only give need based aid. So the reality is, scholarships are a discount from the sticker price, and it doesn't really matter where they come from. And then I would encourage you to focus on the schools first because that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck by
Mm.
far. It's great if you get 5, 10, 100 scholarships through the organizations you participate in, but the chance is those 10 might not add up to what you get from the university. So focus your time and attention to where you're going to get the most return on your investment.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I think it's great that in the application process that is kind of built into some of the schools' application processes. I know that in a lot of Texas schools, at least, A&M, UT, Texas Tech, they all have like built-in scholarship essays and things
Mhm.
like that, so that students can be considered for those kind of automatically.
Yeah, and I think like a rule of thumb that I like to tell families and parents is in terms of merit scholarships, like free money that you're going to get to attend a school, you need to look at the population of the state. The bigger the population of the state, the less likely you are to get huge discounts from the cost of attendance.
Mm.
My daughter applied to 9 schools, and the schools where she got the biggest awards came from the states with the smallest populations: Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Arkansas, Mississippi, right? Not Texas, not Florida, not North Carolina. So I think that's a big thing you can think of as a general rule of thumb that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's very helpful. Are there really scholarships sitting out there that nobody applies for?
There are, and I don't want to call it an oxymoron, but it's a unique situation, right? Generally, when scholarships go unclaimed, it's because one of two reasons: one, people don't know about them and don't find them, or two, the scholarship requirements are so unique and specific that nobody meets them. Um, I was lucky enough to donate some money to the University of Nebraska where I went, and that's one of the things they walked through with me. They're like, I was a military brat, so I wanted military brats to be the first choice. And then they were like, you can put a GPA restriction on it, but then you're shrinking your pool. And honestly, not being a great student as a high school young person, I wanted it to go to the kids that didn't have good GPAs, but made it into college and found a school that was interesting to them and had, a future to chase. So I would
Yeah.
say those two things um, do cause scholarships to go unclaimed. And there's with the internet, there's better tools now to highlight what scholarships are available. But I just know in our local area here in Spring Branch, there's scholarships from FFA and the Spring Branch Education Foundation
Mhm.
that go unclaimed each year. Um, some of the schools where Tarleton and like SFA have awards, but not as many kids go there and don't know to apply for them. So uh,
Yeah.
they are out there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when should a student start applying for scholarships? Is it senior year or is it earlier?
I think they will want to start that process the summer between junior and senior year. And I think a lot of it depends on a number of things, right? Like, are they applying to a major that schools are fit to major, where, if you're going to be accepted to the school, you have to be accepted to the major.
Mhm.
Business, computer science, engineering are typically nursing,
Right.
ones like that. Um, but also think about the activities you've been involved in, right? Like my daughter was big in FFA. The Spring Branch Education Foundation has a whole list, and you have to go through and see which ones do you fit for.
Yeah.
Part of it too will be college visits. One of the big things I learned when my daughter visited Tennessee, they said in the College of Agriculture, there's not a ton of dollars for freshmen, but if you do well your freshman year, there's a lot of program specific dollars from sophomore through senior year.
Oh, cool.
So there's just different things that you want to investigate, right? And
Mhm.
um, you know, maybe you have to pay full price your freshman year, but if you can get a significant discount the last 3 years, that school might all of a sudden become more affordable. Back to
Right.
your earlier question about should you apply or not. So,
Yeah.
and just search and see, where you fall in your unique skills, abilities, talents, and look for scholarships in that area.
Yeah, yeah. I think that can be. I've seen the list that SBEF hands out, and
Mhm.
then you have helped us with. You send us a big PDF for each student, and I think that can be daunting for families to kind of like pick through where does my student fit in. And so I think it's great that there are so many opportunities out there. Do you have any suggestions on how to kind of sift through the ones that are available?
It's just the filtering tools available on those websites.
Yeah.
I wish I had a magic bullet, but there really isn't one. Again, the College Aid Pro software is very good. Niche it
Yeah.
has a great site. Um, if anybody's interested, I can probably send you 10. They all do about the same thing, and some of the scholarships overlap. But again, I really want to encourage families to focus on what the university offers. Don't forget about the impact that your grades and GPA have. We talk about the University of Alabama all the time, right? They
Mhm.
list very specifically what your grades or GPA and test scores need to be. And honestly, you might be better off coming to the Enrichery, taking the test prep and improving your SAT score by 100 points than you would be looking for, two or three to $5,000 scholarships. So make sure you understand what your options are and take advantage of the tools and the things the Enrichery does that can have a meaningful, and material impact on 4-year cost.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, how many scholarships should students realistically apply for?
As much as they want to and have time, right? I would say on average, you're going to look at about 10 hours for every $3,000 scholarship you get.
Mhm.
And it became very apparent this year with my daughter. She applied for about 10 different scholarships ranging from 1,000 to 10,000. And out of 10, I think she got two outside of what she got from the university.
Right. Yeah. Um, this is an interesting question that we got. Are scholarship scams a real thing, and how do families spot them?
Well, I guess I don't know what they mean by scholarship scams. Um, I think anything you're doing through the university is obviously fine. That's not a scam. I think if you're paying somebody to get you a scholarship, I'd be very hesitant around that.
Gotcha.
But most of the time, I sit on the review committee for several scholarships, and most of the processes are pretty well documented and
Mhm.
thought out, right? Like how many schools were you accepted into? What was your GPA? There's two essays. Did you get your essays in on time? How well are they written, right? All those are, local civic organizations are typically going to be pretty good, I think.
Legit. Okay.
Do you
Awesome.
have any more context by chance? I'm just curious.
So that was really just the question.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm sure that there are all sorts of things out there that could trip students up,
Yeah, absolutely.
and families too. So I think that is why it's important for families to be involved, and why it's important to enlist our help as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So in the Enrichery, like I said earlier, we do cover the application process for these scholarships. So I feel like if we're pretty well versed in what scams might look like, so we can definitely walk families through that. um, so we talked a little bit about scholarships, FAFSA, merit aid. What does that look like for a student? What kind of student qualifies for merit aid?
It really depends on the school, right? And the student. Um, Most schools will have some kind of list of scholarships that are available.
Mm.
And when you apply, a lot of times they'll send you an award letter saying you were accepted and what you need to do. But at the bottom in the fine print, there'll be a list of scholarships that they think you might fit for based on your criteria. But I mean, there's schools, in kind of rural areas that need applicants and are very generous. And you don't have to have a 3.5, 4.0, you don't have to have 100 AP classes. But again, you have to be comfortable in that environment. The school has to have a program that fits what you want to do. and so on. But I would say, obviously, the better your test scores are, the better your opportunity for some high dollar scholarships.
Awesome.
So again, another plug for your test prep, right?
Yes, yes. um, some big name schools don't offer merit aid at all.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Those schools would typically be called what we call 100% need met schools.
Mhm.
So they are going to look at a family's financial situation and make their award based solely on that. I think the underlying premise is they're a highly selective university,
Mhm.
and everybody coming there is already valedictorian, perfect SAT scores.
Right.
So it's harder for them to distinguish candidate to candidate, but they want to support on the financial side. So I would say, if you want a rule of thumb, somewhere between the 50 and 70 most selective schools are typically going to be 100% need met. And then, some of those will mix in a little bit of merit aid or have, one off endowed scholarships that are unique to somebody from the university that they want to fund. But for the most part, it doesn't matter how good your grades are. It matters how strong your family's financial situation is on whether you get aid or not.
Gotcha. Yeah. We cover college admissions from, I mean, starting, we've got kids starting in seventh grade at this point, which is awesome to see. So, kind of grade by grade, if a parent of a freshman is watching or listening right now, what should they be doing right now for financial aid or scholarships?
Well, I think the most important thing is really discovering what you love and what you want to study. I think it's like anything else in life. And as parents, if you think about your career, if you love your career, you're probably happier in life. If you go to work every day and it sucks the life out of you a little bit, it's probably not the greatest. So I would say work to find things you love, right? And most schools, a lot of them around this area have Naviance, and they
Mhm.
have two tools in there. One is a tool that will help you pick what kind of school you want to go to, right? A big school, a small school, a urban area, a rural area, lots of kids, fewer kids, things like that.
Mhm.
But then they also have a tool that will kind of assess your career aptitudes and
Yeah.
what you're good at. And I would lean into that as a freshman and at least, uh, get an idea of what the results say. And as a father of a senior who was gung ho on marine biology for at least 2.5 years and switched abruptly to ag and ag business at the end, I would say parents prepare yourself for changes.
Yes, yes. My daughter started off with the medical track and wanted to be a nurse, and that was, I mean, that was the goal from like 5 years old and on.
Mm.
Got into freshman year, took HOSA and or was in HOSA and took the health sciences
Yeah,
classes and was like, I don't want to do this. And so now we're headed toward business, which is
yeah,
fun.
yeah. But I mean, it's good to know, and the more you can, do well in the classes you take, and the more experiences you have, like learning that you didn't like that is going to potentially help on your essay, right? Like
Exactly.
those are things that maybe you should make a little note to yourself to say for when the essays come out. Um,
Yeah. Um, Sophomore year is kind of just the same thing. I feel like ninth and 10th grade are exploration years,
yeah.
and then we get real serious in junior year.
I tend to agree. I think one of the most important things, though, is as a family, if you're traveling around the US and you go to any city that has a college or university, pop in,
Yeah.
walk through the campus, see what it's like, see what you like about it, see what you don't. Um, Visits had a profound impact on the schools my daughter liked. So
Mhm.
I would say the sooner you can do that and kind of identify the things you like or don't like, and probably helps a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We started those visits pretty early too. Um, and then junior year, I mean, I feel like a lot of students at that point are just focused on the college admissions process, figuring out what your school list is going to look like, which is where those visits come in,
Mhm.
choosing your major, and then really going through the application process. So senior year is the time to, you've hopefully got your applications in by then. By the time you start senior year, and then you can start focusing on the scholarship end.
Yeah, I would say in your junior year, you probably want to take the ACT and SAT as
Mhm.
many times as you can afford and are comfortable doing.
Yeah.
I understand it's a pain, right? But like the better you can get those test scores, the more it's going to help reduce your bill.
Yeah.
And with my daughter, um, she took them early in her senior year one time. And then as we were going through the application process, one of the steps we did was after every application was sent, we sent a email to the admissions counselor that she would be assigned to and said, "Hey, my name is so and so. I'm super excited to be a volunteer or a bulldog. I just submitted my application. I wanted you to know, how excited I am, and would you be willing to take a look and make any suggestions on anything I might need to improve?
Mhm.
And quite a few said, "Hey, everything looks great. You're golden." A couple came back and said, "Hey, your test scores are a little bit lower than what we see admitted applicants, and I'd encourage you to take the test again."
Hmm.
So those kind of things, right? And as you get later into your senior year, rolling out of bed at 8 a.m. on a Saturday to take the SAT isn't probably high on the list. So
Yeah.
I'd really encourage kids to focus throughout their junior year to try and get those done and be prepared for maybe one last try in their senior year. But um, that's just my personal.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the path that we have students take as well, is like get that test prep done early between sophomore junior year, take a few tests in junior year, if you need to test again senior year, August, September.
Yeah.
But after that, I feel like same thing. Like if I had tried to drag my son out of bed at 8 a.m. on a Saturday during his senior year, he would have been like, "What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, where am I and what are we doing?" um what about parents who are watching or listening who feel like they might already be behind in this process? Maybe they're a junior year parent and haven't really even thought about this.
I would say it's never too late, right? Like, and every family situation is unique, but um, from the financial side, the one thing I would tell you is, you know, using your prior year tax return matters. And if you're a family who is a business owner and can control your income, though there are things you want to think about
Mhm.
around that. If you're potentially moving and you're going to sell a house that has a huge capital gain, you might not want to sell it in that prior year. Outside of those decisions, that you can't unwind because of timing, it's never too late, right? Like, just make sure your kids are focused on their grades, their test scores, their activities, document those things that go into it, and all those things align to get you the best cost out of the application process.
So this is kind of an off the cuff question from me as a
Okay.
parent. So this year would be our prior year for my
Okay.
daughter. Um, don't make any big moves financially.
Yeah, I mean, anything you can do to minimize your income in that year, it's
Mhm.
going to help you, you know, in terms of how the FAFSA calculates your need-based aid. The lower your income that year, the higher your possibility of getting aid. Now, everybody's situation's unique, right? If you're a W-2 employee,
Mhm.
your wages are, usually typically pretty fixed.
Right.
But, if your boss came and said, "Hey, I can pay you your bonus on December or in January, what would you prefer?" It might make sense to say, "I'll take it in January this
Yeah.
year."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. And I'm assuming that was not permission for me to lessen my income by shopping. No, don't work
Well,
that. It doesn't work like that.
yeah, your income doesn't go down based on what you spend, unfortunately. Otherwise, we could all figure something out probably.
So kind of going back to the financial aid end of things with
Mhm.
talking about loans. This is kind of a more sensitive topic I
Right.
have found in on our end of things. So is it accurate to say that most families end up with some sort of loans?
I would say it's very common, and sometimes it's because of flexibility.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's because, like my dad, he was an old school military guy, and he was like, "If you graduate in 4 years, don't have any babies, and don't go to jail, I'll pay off your loans." And that was his way of trying to keep me out of jail, so, or have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Other families, they maybe make enough to pay for a majority of college, but not 100%, right?
Mhm.
And every family is different. So, some will be loans in the parent's name, some will be loans in the student's name. It's just important that no matter who borrows, they understand the consequence of the borrow and what that ultimate payback is going to look like over, a 10-year period.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so speaking of that, one of the questions we got is how much debt is too much for a student to graduate with?
That's a great question. And there is actually As a rule of thumb, for every $10,000 you borrow, it will be $100 a month on the payback for 10 years. So if you borrow 10,000, your payment's $100 a month. If you borrow 20,000, it's 200 a month, and so on as you go up that scale.
Yeah. Okay.
But the first year salary is a good rule of thumb. Don't borrow more than that over 4 years.
That's really good advice. Um, so who should be the one taking on the loan? You mentioned that there are parent loans, there are student loans. Which one? And
It depends on every family situation. The student loans through the federal direct program are going to be a slightly lower overall cost. The interest rate is a little bit lower, and the origination fees are a little bit lower.
Mm.
But they're in the student's name, and there's a maximum a student can borrow. Right now, it's $27,000 over 4 years, so it's $5,500 their freshman year, $6,500 sophomore, $7,500 junior and senior year, and that's very I don't know what the term would be, very payable for most students,
Right.
right? Like if that's all you borrow, you're in a pretty good
Yeah.
situation. Parent plus loans, there's been some changes to that just recently. You used to be able to borrow the full cost of attendance. Now parents are going to be limited to $20,000 a year. I have to check the absolute number, but I want to say it's 65,000 over the course of 4 years. So
Okay.
you cannot borrow more than 20,000 a year or more than 65,000 over the total of 4 years. Um, so that's a new development, and that's changed in the last year.
Okay. Um, so as far as saving for college,
Mhm.
if a family is just now starting to save, maybe their kid is in middle school or early high school, what is the smartest move?
I think in general, for most families, saving into a 529 plan makes the most sense. That it's what it's designed for. There's potentially some tax benefits. You're limited in the investment selection, so you can't make horrible decisions, right? Like if you're not very knowledgeable on the stock market,
Mhm.
they have tools that will help you find a good fit, and a lot of them are like glide path based. So as you get closer to needing the money, they become less risky automatically. So there's less chance if something happens like a war in Iran that's going to dramatically impact what you've saved. So
Yeah.
I would say for most people, that's great. And if you don't end up using that money, it gives you a lot of options in terms of putting it into a Roth IRA for the student in the future and saving, excuse me, helping them save for retirement.
Okay. Um, what if a family didn't save a lot or much? Is it too late to do anything?
No, I mean, I tell families all the time, right? Most colleges offer a payment plan. So, like where my daughter's going, Mississippi State University, they have a 10 payment plan throughout the year. So, in theory, instead of having to come up with, I don't know, 16,000 on August 1st and 16,000 on January 1st, I can spread that out over 10 payments and do, 1,600 a month, or
Yeah.
well, I guess it would be uh, 3,200 a month over the 10 payments to get to the total. So anything you can do to minimize your borrowing, even making those monthly payments out of cash flow, is well worth it on the back end and can be the difference in, several $100s a month.
Awesome. So we just both lived through this spring of senior year. Super fun. The offer letters are arriving. When financial aid offers start coming in, they can be kind of confusing for families. How should a family compare one financial aid offer to another?
Yeah, so unfortunately the letters are horrible. I wish, I mean, and some schools have really good ones, right?
Mhm.
But just as a rule of thumb, they're not standardized, so you can't look at school A and compare it identically to school B, right?
Mhm.
So really, what you have to do is look at the cost of attendance, look at the direct billed items that are going to be billed to you, and then the indirect items separately, right? Because you might be able to control those. I know for Mississippi State, they have a number for travel that I don't think will be that high.
Mm.
Um, and so you can kind of take that out. But then you want to start looking at the awards. Is it a merit award or is it a loan, right? So merit awards are typically going to be for all 4 years. And if it doesn't say that on the letter, you actually want to call or email and get verification. Um, and need-based awards are going to change year to year, right? So it might be a grant based on your financial situation, but it will change next year depending on how your financial aid or financial situation as a family changes. So really, when you're looking at the numbers, you just want to look at free money that you don't have to pay back and not free money that you are going to have a payment for. And a lot of people, just see the end number and don't realize that those are typically combined.
Okay. Okay. Great information. Um, can you negotiate a financial aid offer?
I wouldn't call it negotiate, but you can appeal.
Okay.
Um, and there's two appeals, right? There's a merit-based appeal, and that's just saying my student is amazing. They've done something incredible typically since you sent your application in.
Mhm.
Um, just use my daughter as an example. Sorry, Kinsey, I love you. She was an FFA this year, and her steer was reserve champion, uh, both market and showmanship. So those are two things that didn't make it onto her application that are a pretty big deal. So you could go back and say, hey, in addition to everything else that made me great, I did this since I applied, and I'd like. Generally, I would suggest you ask for a very specific number, right?
Okay.
And in general, I would say, between 0 and 3,000 is a win. 3,000 to call it 6,000 is probably pretty good. And anything over 6,000 is a home run on an appeal. And then on the flip side, there's a need-based appeal. And typically that isn't necessarily asking for more money. That's saying there's a change in your financial situation and you'd like them to recalculate your SAI.
Okay.
So you're going to say, hey, when I submitted my tax return, I made 100,000. Since then, my spouse lost their job and now we made 50,000. Please recalculate my SAI based on those changes.
Mm.
And it can be income based. It can be sometimes expense based if you had medical expenses. If you've had to suddenly care for another dependent, whether that's another student that maybe your sister's kid, or maybe it's an elderly parent who fell ill, right? All those things can be considered. You just need to build a narrative around how it's impacting your situation and your ability to pay. And then the school will review it and render a decision. So yeah, you can appeal both merit and need.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
no, that definitely makes sense. It's an appeal, not a negotiation.
Exactly.
um, if a family gets a great offer the first year, is it locked in for 4 years?
Typically, most merit offers are for 4 years. Really, the only thing that depends are you maintaining full-time student status and are you maintaining any GPA requirements?
Okay.
But I've seen students who got in trouble in a dorm and lost a scholarship. I've seen students, not take enough hours and lose a scholarship. So
Mhm.
those are things you definitely want to consider. And if there's any question, call and ask before you accept the award. I would never encourage you to decline it, but always call and get the full story from the financial aid office.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of this is situational.
Mhm.
And so we got a few questions. Just what about my situation?
Okay.
What about divorced or separated parents? That's a common thing.
Yep.
Whose income counts on the FAFSA?
So several years ago, it was whoever provided 51% of the financial support, or excuse me, 51%, who the student lived with 51% of the time. I
Okay.
really fumbled
Which
through that. Sorry. Initially, it was who the student lived with 51% of the time. Now it's who provides more than 51% of the financial support.
okay.
In some cases, it is a lower earning parent who provides more support. And if that's the case, it's going to be better for your situation.
Oh,
So there's
okay.
definitely some nuance there. And if parents can, in a divorce situation, can be amicable in this time period, it's going to be to their benefit to sort that out together.
Yeah. What if a family's income dropped recently because of a job loss or medical issue? And I think you covered this a little bit. Is the FAFSA stuck with last year's number?
Yeah. So what you would want to do, and this is from years of experience, I wouldn't mess with the FAFSA after you submitted it.
Okay.
I'd go back to the Department of Financial Aid, and every school has an appeal or a special circumstances process,
Mhm.
and you would find what they call the special circumstances appeal letter. You would define what has changed, provide any documentation or support, and do it that way.
Okay.
That's much more effective in my opinion. One caveat to that
Yeah.
is a lot of schools will say there needs to be a certain amount of time have passed. I
Okay.
want to say USC, out in California says 10 weeks. Some say, 4 months. It can vary school to school.
Okay.
But depending on the severity of it and what's happened, I think they have typically some leeway to make a decision.
Okay. Well, I'm hearing a lot of like the colleges are there to help, really. They want your students there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, some are more easy to work with than
Mhm.
others, and some, unfortunately, are, uh, what I call on the naughty list. I've had one where, you know, a family had a restraining order for physical violence, but they still counted the father's finances, right?
Wow.
And I think if that made it more public, or if there were more families that could document that, I think things like
Mhm.
that would change. So
Yeah.
there are some schools that end up on the naughty list.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, what if a student wants to go to community college first and then transfer? I was just telling you we had a handful of students that got into great schools, but they weren't the schools that they were really shooting for. So they did decide to go either, Austin Community College or HCC. Does aid work the same way for those students?
So most of those community colleges or schools are going to accept the FAFSA. In many cases, your $5,500 federal direct student loan will pay for a year at a
Yeah.
lot of those schools, right? Especially if it's a commuter college. Um, so yeah, most of them are going to be eligible. There are a few that are not, and if they're not eligible, that should be a sign that maybe it's not the best destination for you.
Yeah.
But if finances are a challenge, I think that's the most underlooked and best way to get a 4-year degree, right? Like you can
Hmm.
knock out 2 years at community college for a fraction of the cost,
Yeah.
and then nobody's going to know. When you get your diploma, it says Texas A&M or University of Nebraska
Yeah.
or Mississippi State, wherever, right? So I would say if finances are challenging, go that route to the extent you're willing to give up the big city or big college experience.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. My daughter is in one of those programs through her school. So thankfully we don't have to pay for the first 2 years of her undergrad degree, which sets us up for some nice success in the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
Very excited about that. What about students who might need a fifth year to graduate? Does aid cover that?
So this is one of the more nuanced one, and
Yeah.
it's going to be, it depends, and a lot of times it can be determined by the school.
Okay.
There are caps on the amount of federal direct loans you've taken, and typically they're considered use it or lose it.
Mhm.
So like I said earlier, 55 freshmen, 65, 75, and 75. If you go a fifth year and haven't hit those caps, the school may be able to facilitate, some additional funds.
Yeah.
But I would say, as a rule of thumb, just assume that most aid is going to be for 4 years.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I am super excited that you were here and able to answer all of these questions that sometimes we cannot. Um, if you could tell one parent, or if you could tell every parent of a high schooler just one thing about paying for college, what would it be?
Save early. The number 216 always resonates in my head. Do you have any idea what that number is?
No.
It's the number of months you have from the time a child's born until they leave for college. 18 times
Oh
12 is
my gosh.
216. So, if you think of in-state public school, Texas, you're looking at 32,000. That's about $500 a month if you want to pay for 4 years, right? So start early, save. It's never too late. There's always options. It just may not be the dream, right?
Yeah.
But don't get discouraged. Evaluate all your options. Look for schools that will be generous to your unique situation, and try to maximize those. And if you're
Awesome.
lucky enough to be able to stripe a check to whatever school you want to go to, that's even better.
Yeah, yeah. So my last question to
Mhm.
you kind of plugged our program a little bit. Where can listeners or viewers find you if they want to get more information from you or want to work with you?
Great. Thanks for asking. I work at Advocates Wealth Planning. It's a local financial advisory firm here in Houston. Our office is right behind Ciro's and Hotel Zaza. And I also do some consulting for College Aid Pro on the side, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Awesome. And you can also find him with us at the Enrichery in the fall when we start going over scholarships for class of 2027.